Dr. John for about 5 or 6 years. And you're not going to find a sharper guy when it comes to what you're going to hear him talk about. He brings over 40 years of experience in clinical nutrition, functional medicine, chiropractic medicine, acupuncture. We do need a volunteer, is that right, Dr. John? For acupuncture. I'm not kidding about that. Where did I get to? Throughout his career, he's worked with patients to uncover the root cause of health challenges, develop personalized plans that support lasting wellness, physically, mentally, and emotionally. You see the tie with Tai Chi with this too. A nationally recognized educator and speaker, Dr. Podolsky has lectured across the country on natural health, clinical nutrition, and integrative medicine. He's held leadership positions within several professional organizations, including serving as the president of the American Board of Chiropractic Internists and currently serves as the executive director of the American Clinical Board of Nutrition. Dr. John Zykolim is also the co-author of the book, Unleashing the Physician Within, the 12 Steps for Maximizing the Health of Your Body, Mind, and Spirit. I think we've got that book over there, don't we, on the table? Good, you can see that later. And today he continues to help patients improve their health through his work at the Natural Medicine Institute right here in the Villages. This afternoon, Dr. John will share insight into natural medicine alternative, preventative wellness strategies, and practical steps that can help us take a more active role in our own health journey. Before I introduce Dr. John, the woman behind Dr. John is Rhoda. Rhoda, waving to everybody. They've been together for a long time.
43 years.
43 years, isn't that great? So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Dr. John Podolsky. Test this, but there we go.
Thank you all for being here today. I appreciate being here. Also, David, thank you very much. Obviously, Blackston Financial talks about your financial well-being. I'm going to talk a little bit about your physical well-being. Before I get started, though, I want everybody to turn to the person next to them, and I want you to repeat this. Even though Dr. John's a fascinating speaker, come on, everybody turn to the person next to them. If I fall asleep during his talk, you have my permission to gently nudge me in the ribs. Okay. All right. All right. So this is who I am again. David read a big long thing about me. That's great. I am licensed in Florida in chiropractic medicine. I do have a naturopathic medicine degree. I have a medical degree. My poor wife, so many years I've spent in school chasing degrees and education and all that. And I've got a bunch of board certifications in clinical nutrition as well. And my office happens to be in the same place as David. Funny thing there. So we're right on County Road 466 in the Santa Fe Professional Building. So before we get started also, I have to give a little disclaimer. If I was here today to talk about the latest, newest medication, I wouldn't have to give this disclaimer. But to keep our friends at the FDA happy, and my son who's an attorney, keep him happy, I'm here to tell you, I'm not here to tell you to stop taking any medication that you may be prescribed by your doctor. Those are conversations that we have individually with patients on a one-on-one basis if we need to. But I am going to give you some information that may be a little different than what your doctor tells you, or Dr. Google has told you, or your neighbor down the street has told you as well. So everybody okay with that? Okay. So the approach that we take in our office, my focus really is functional medicine, functional nutrition. How many of you are familiar with functional medicine at all, or at least heard about it? Okay, great. So functional medicine, we're looking just beyond the root cause. We're looking for the root cause of your symptoms, not just your symptoms. And a lot of times when you go to the doctor, people go to the doctor because they're sick or they have a problem or something hurts or something like that. And oftentimes when you go to the traditional route, basically the thing is we've got a pill for every ill. So just like an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is not the major part of the problem, it's everything that lies below the surface. So things like lifestyle, what you eat, what you drink, what you smoke or don't smoke, what you're exposed to, environmental issues, and certainly genetics has a little bit of a role to play with things as well. So those are all the things that really make up people's symptoms, All these different factors below the surface is what drives people to the doctor or causes some of their symptoms. Now, we also know that most healthcare facilities have what I call the standard of care affliction. And basically what that means is that for whatever problem you may have, wherever you go, you're going to get pretty much the same treatment for the same problem. Whether you go to Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Johns Hopkins, it doesn't matter. For the same problem, you're pretty much going to get treated the same way because that's what the standard of care is. Unfortunately, the standard of care also means, what's the first question you're asked when you call up a doctor's office? What insurance do you have, right? Because the doctor has to be able to conform to what's going on with the insurance coverage that you have. So what does that really mean? Well, here's you with all your health problems, health concerns, health issues, and then the doctor has to fit into what we call the doctor payer box, whether it's Medicare, Medicare Advantage, HMO, PPO, anything like that. And then the problem with that is that if the doctor steps outside of that box, they're not going to get paid for the work that they do. Now, most doctors are very honest and they want to take care of their patients and help them, but there are certain things that doctors can and cannot do when ordering tests. Maybe you've experienced it yourself. But all of us that have Part D Medicare, we know that may change from year to year. What's covered, what medications are covered, what isn't covered, and so you have to be aware of that on a regular basis too. So unfortunately, sometimes certain things, well, they're not covered anymore, or no, we're not going to pay for that test. And it's not even the doctor that's making that decision. It may be a clerk in some insurance company office that says yes or no, we're not going to pay for that. It's just frustrating, isn't it, sometimes when that happens. So those of us who practice outside of the box thinking, we look at your diet, we look at your lifestyle, we look at nutrition, we look at how much water you drink, how much exercise you do. All these different things fit into basically treating the person right. So we're really looking for the root cause of all these different issues that people have. So my question often is, why do you wait till you're sick enough to get a diagnosis before it's kind of a mindset of all of our healthcare system now? You've got to have basically a diagnosis that the doctor can bill to the insurance company. And the problem with that is this. I'll show you here in a second. I found this from the Medicare manual. Care that seeks to prevent disease, promote health, and prolong or enhance the quality of life is not considered medically necessary and therefore not payable. Anybody have a problem with that? Okay, you should, because that's what the system is. Here's a quick example of that. You go to the doctor and you need a heart bypass operation. Now, Medicare will pay $100,000 if you have that heart bypass, but they don't want to pay for $200, $300 a year, so you don't need it in the first place to begin with. It's kind of backwards, isn't it? We have the greatest healthcare system in the world as far as certain things go. Acute trauma, infection, you're piled up in a car wreck, have a heart attack or a stroke, get me to the hospital. That's where you need to be. But as far as chronic degenerative diseases, arthritis, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, the care is not really that, I will hate to say it, it's not that great. You probably just experience it yourself, other than there's another pill for whatever problem that you may have. And the whole point behind all of this is that according to the government, the only legal way to treat disease in this country is with a drug. A pill for every ill, that's the standard of care. And then if you look on the bottle of any nutritional supplement, what does it say up there? These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. The product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So again, standard of care, what drug can we put the patient on based on the testing that we've done? So why are we talking about wearing out your body? Very often when patients come in to see us at our office, one of the things they'll say to me is, Doc, I want to live to be 100 years old and maybe even beyond that. And I'm like, great, that's great. But my question often is, what's the point of living to be 100 if you spend the last 10 years of your life in a nursing home, in a wheelchair, drooling all over yourself, and you don't know who your friends and family are? And a lot of that is because of how we treat or take care of ourselves. Both of these women are actually 80 years old. And look at the difference between one and the other. It's really based on, that woman on the left is a real person. I've seen videos of her. She's actually, I think, 84 now. She takes care of herself. She works out. She exercises. She eats well. She tries to take care of her body as best as she can. So there's a lot of things that we can do ourselves to take care of our health along the way. So here's a little definition of health that I like. This is from Dorland's Medical Dictionary. A state of optimal physical, mental, emotional, and social or spiritual well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. All right, how many of you fit that definition perfectly? Come on, no hands? Come on. It's a tough definition, isn't it? But that's if you consider what health really is. So many people only think about their health when they have symptoms. So basically, it's kind of like if you're driving down the road and all of a sudden the check oil light comes on in your car, most of us realize we need to do something about that, right? We're not going to ignore that one. Sometimes you ignore the check engine light, but when the check oil light comes on, you got to check it out, right? So what do? Well, one thing that you can do is you go see your mechanic, and the mechanic says, I know what the problem is. Let's just cut that wire under the dashboard. The light goes out, problem solved, right? No, not at all. That's what you're doing many times when you're just covering up your symptoms with a drug. It's not really fixing your problem. We're not getting to the root cause of it. The other thing that you can do is maybe do nothing. Those are some of the most dangerous words that you can say. Maybe it'll just go away. Anybody ever say that? Anybody hear somebody say that? So the best choice is to really check things out, get a full diagnostic, see what's happening, see what's going on, see what the problems really are, and how to really fix the problem. Now we know in healthcare today we have 4 major health challenges. We have chronic degenerative disease, arthritis, cancer, diabetes, heart disease. We also have autoimmune problems, things like Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Hashimoto's is the #1 autoimmune problem in the United States. Many times patients will come in to me and they'll have thyroid problems, and the first question I'll ask them is, have you been checked for Hashimoto's thyroiditis? And they look at me kind of puzzled, no, what's that? So obviously their doctor has not checked them for that. Why? Because the traditional doctor's probably not going to do anything different than write a prescription for levothyroxine or Synthroid or something like that, and they won't talk about the necessary things to change your diet and your lifestyle that can help reduce the symptoms of your Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And of course we know infectious diseases. You've all heard of antibiotic resistance disease, right? Part of that is the doctor's fault because they write prescriptions like candy, but part of it is your fault. I hate to say this, but every time your child was sick or you were sick, you run to the doctor, and the first thing on your mind is, maybe I need an antibiotic. So we've kind of created that situation in ourselves over the years. And then genetic defect diseases. Now, the traditional thinking on that was there's really no cure for it, but we know a whole science has developed called epigenetics, which has to do with diet, lifestyle, nutrition, that can actually bypass or compensate for genetic variabilities that people have rather than being stuck with it for the rest of your life. So here's a real good example of that too. Anybody remember President Nixon in 1971 declared the war on cancer? You all remember that? Okay, well he did, back in 1971. Back then, the chances of developing cancer in the United States lifetime was 1 in 26 people. So this war has continued on for 55 years, over $20 trillion. How many think we're doing better now than we were back in 1971? Anybody? Nobody? Yeah. Well, the real answer is now 1 in 3 women and 1 in 2 men. It's a little scary, isn't it, that things have not really progressed and gotten better considering all the money that's been spent on health care. So in the United States, we spend over $2.7 trillion on health care alone. But you know what? We're number 37 in the world. There are some third world countries that rank higher than the United States. And it's kind of crazy, isn't it, to think that really happens. How could that really happen? Well, part of it is, remember in the 1990s when HMOs came in and PPOs and all that? And then they decided, yep, we're not going to pay that anymore. No, we're going to limit what the doctor can charge for that. And many patients now think that I'm tired of taking prescription medication. The drugs aren't working for me. A few years ago, I had one patient who came in that was on 25 different medications. Can you imagine that? 25 different drugs every day. Most of them were to counteract the side effects of the drugs that they were taking. So a lot of people now are asking about, there's got to be an alternative. There's an increasing demand for natural medicine, for wellness, for getting to the root cause of problems and not just covering up my symptoms with the drug. So there's a bunch of articles that were published in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, in 2024. 80% of patients had or were using some form of alternative medicine. That's pretty amazing statistics, 80%. There were 243 million more visits to alternative providers than to all types of traditional doctors. And that was published also in JAMA in 2024. So people are looking and searching for alternative medicine, natural medicine, alternatives to just the drug merry-go-round that many people get on. So here's some of the clues to that metabolic health and what that really means. And basically, metabolic health means your body is physically and biochemically, mentally, emotionally functioning as well as it can. And the problem sometimes with that is if you have two or more of the following things that are out of balance, your body is really not metabolically healthy. And that's really where health starts from a metabolic perspective. So the first thing, chronic inflammation. There was an article written on Time magazine that inflammation is the secret killer. Now, inflammation can be a good thing. Let's say you cut your finger and it gets red and swollen and it heals up and it goes away. Great. But inflammation that doesn't go away, that's chronic, that's ongoing, that is a major, major problem in your body. And it is really the gasoline or the fuel that fires disease in people. It doesn't cause it, but it's adding fuel to the fire, basically, when you're chronically inflamed due to oxidative damage. You've all heard of antioxidants, right? Vitamin C and things like that. Well, antioxidants help to quash the inflammation caused by oxidation in the body. And then the second, what's the number one risk factor for cardiovascular disease? Does anybody really know? Arthritis, cancer, diabetes, dementia? There we go, we just talked about it. 95% of heart attacks are not caused by your elevated cholesterol. That is a whole other story that we talk about in other lectures that I do. That is not the cause of heart disease, folks. It's chronic inflammation. And all that sugar that you eat over the years, that fuels the inflammation that's causing 90% of the heart attacks and strokes that people actually have. So here's some blood tests that are done that we do often on our patients just to see where they're at as far as their inflammation goes. How many of you know what your homocysteine number is? Come on, nobody knows? If you're my patient, you know. Nobody knows? How about your CRP number, C-reactive protein? Anybody know it? Come on, really guys? Nobody knows. What about up front? Okay. What about fibrinogen? These are all inflammatory markers. These are all little red flags that pop up years before you have your first symptom of a TIA or a heart attack or anything like that. Why don't you know? Your doctor won't test you for them. Why? Medicare doesn't want to pay for it. Medicare can save billions of dollars in healthcare costs if we would test these things on people. Like I said, 10 to 15 years before you have a heart attack, you've got a little red flag warning sign that you may be heading down the wrong path, and let's fix it now before you end up in the hospital having that heart bypass operation. And by the way, these are very inexpensive tests. Homocysteine is $10, CRP is $6, very inexpensive tests. But again, Medicare doesn't want to pay for it, and then your doctor doesn't want to order it because doctors don't want to step on Medicare's toes and have their practice investigated that they're charging or doing things that Medicare doesn't want them to do. It's kind of sad, but that's where it is. Here's another indicator of metabolic health. And what we call this one is the waist-hip ratio. And basically, your waist circumference, you measure around your waist, should be less than 1/2 of your height in inches. So think about, calculate that for a second. If you're 67 inches tall, which I am, 5'7", well, I used to be, maybe I've shrunk a little bit, I don't know. But anyhow, my waist should be half of that, about 33.5 to 34 inches. So that's one way to tell if you're metabolically healthy or not. We look at your waist-hip circumference ratio. And then the next test we look at is your blood pressure. Now, many times recently, this whole thing has changed, and you've probably heard your doctor say, everybody's blood pressure's got to be below 120 over 80 now, right? You've heard that, right? That is crazy. That's crazy. As we get older, by nature, our blood vessels do harden a little bit, get a little stiffer, and our blood pressure has to necessarily go up a little bit to get the blood up to your brain, so you don't forget where your keys are, or who your spouse is, or why did I walk into this room today? I don't remember. So blood pressure. So blood pressure is a major indicator of poor cardiovascular health. So here's where the new numbers have changed recently. Now, I was just talking to a good friend of mine who's an eye doctor here in the Villages, and what he told me is he's seeing a lot of problems with these medications that are lowering everybody's blood pressure too low, and it's actually creating situations where it accentuates or accelerates the development of glaucoma and macular degeneration, because you're not getting blood up to your head fast enough, and your eyes are critically important to have proper blood supply. Not only that, if your blood pressure is too low, maybe some of you have experienced it. We talked with the Tai Chi, we talked about that. Maybe your balance is off. Maybe you're a little dizzy. Maybe you're a little lightheaded. Maybe it's because your blood pressure is too low and you're not getting enough blood up into your head to make things work properly. And one of the functions that takes place of that is having good nitric oxide production in your body. Have you all seen that Super Beats commercial on TV? Okay, so that's one thing that people use to help increase nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide is a gas that your blood vessels produce to keep your blood pressure regulated, to keep your arteries dilated, to keep the blood flow going in the body. And there's a very simple test that we do in our office, a little test strip. We rub it on your tongue and we see what the color of the test strip is if you're making nitric oxide proper or not. It's like opening up the garden hose, unless you have a lot of problems with that. And here's another big situation that we look at, metabolic syndrome. We call metabolic syndrome pre-diabetes. You know, pre-diabetes is before you become diabetic, and that shows up on your blood test. Metabolic syndrome is, again, pre-diabetes. So it means you have high blood pressure, increased central obesity. In other words, the guys look like they're pregnant, or they have that basketball in the front of their belly, and your blood lipids are all out of balance as well. And metabolic syndrome is epidemic in the United States now, and a lot of this is driven by our diet and lifestyle. High fructose corn syrup, too much sugar, too many carbs, too much junk carbs, too much alcohol, all those things. Now, I'm not saying you can't do any of that stuff. Well, high fructose corn syrup I wouldn't recommend to anybody, but the metabolic syndrome, these are our diabetic patients of the future, and you're a heart attack in the making. So there's number 4 that contributes to imbalance in your metabolic system. And then the big one is type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is a game changer. And here's the little numbers on it. The lab range says 4.8 to 5.6 is normal. Pre-diabetes is 5.7 to 6.4 in your A1C. And if you're above 6.4, 6.5 and above, you are considered diabetic. But some of the tests that your doctor doesn't do because Medicare doesn't want to pay for it is, more importantly, is what's your insulin number. And that's a measure of your insulin resistance. The more you force your pancreas to produce insulin, the more your cells become resistant to that insulin, and now the insulin can't do its job in getting the glucose and the blood sugar into your cells, and that's when things become big problems. So glucose, the measure of glucose is basically, it's a snapshot of what your blood sugar is at the moment they did the test. Remember those Polaroid cameras? You take a picture, it develops in a couple of minutes, and you shake it, and then the film, it comes out. That's what the glucose is. That may change from minute to minute. The A1C really is considered an average of your blood sugar over the last 3 months, but really more specifically, it tells us how much damage is being done by sugar to your red blood cells. And that's what the A1C is. It tells us how much glycation or sugar damage is being done. And then insulin, again, is a measure of insulin resistance, how resistant your cells are to insulin and how sicker you are getting as time goes on. Now, what we know about the facts about diabetes, what we know is that over the last 3 or 4 decades of eating, everybody's been told to eat low fat and no fat. Remember that? In the mid-1970s, everybody was told to eat fat, not to eat fat, and fat will make you fat, fat will give you a heart attack. None of that is true. None of that is true. I've never told my patients that because we need good healthy fat in our diet. But following that advice, we now know that diabetes is rampant. Anybody know a diabetic? Pretty much everybody knows somebody that's diabetic. Diabetes is up 700% in the last 50 years, and it's actually doubled in the last 10 years. So there's always a new drug coming out. I'm not going to get started on Ozempic and Mounjaro and all that stuff today, but we do a whole talk on that as well. But anyhow, part of that is because people listened to what the government had to say, and they stopped eating fat, and they started eating more carbs. More grains, more carbs. And what happened is now we have an epidemic of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and dementia. Obesity predisposes you to 3 of the top 5 causes of death in the United States. Number 1 is still heart disease. Number 2 is cancer. Number 4 is diabetes, or we call it diabesity. What's number 3? Anybody know what the 3rd leading cause of death in the United States is? Can't hear you. Speak up. Anybody take a guess? Well, the number 3 leading cause of death is properly prescribed medication. Medication prescribed by I think this should be number 1 if you want to ask my honest opinion. And this was published in the British Medical Journal. It was also published in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. We're talking about properly prescribed medication. This doesn't count the over-the-counter stuff that people take every day, like Tylenol, like ibuprofen, like Benadryl, like all those other medications that you could go into the store. You could buy Claritin and Zyrtec now too. So properly prescribed medication is the number 3 leading cause of death, and these are real medical statistics, not stuff that was just made up. And then another issue with metabolic health is we want to look at your coronary artery score. Anybody have that done? It's a pretty good test. It'll basically tell us how much calcium is being deposited into the arteries around your heart. So many times the issue with that is, especially in women, if you've been told you have osteoporosis, what does your doctor tell you you need to do? Take what? 1,200 milligrams of calcium a day, right? Really, really poor advice. Your body cannot absorb all that calcium, and where does the excess go? It goes into plaquing in the arteries around your heart and up in your brain. Now, some calcium is important, magnesium is much more important, and other minerals, but one of the biggest things people forget about is you have to eat enough protein in your diet. Minimum should be 60 to 80 grams of protein a day. As we get older, all of us tend to eat less protein. But if you don't have protein in your bones to deposit the minerals, you're not going to get any benefit out of it. So all that calcium is really not doing you any good. So a lot of times, though, your doctor they'll do the test on you, and then they'll say, well, you need to be on a statin medication. Anybody hear that? All right, so they prescribe statins like candy. But statins have also been shown to increase your risk of developing glaucoma and macular degeneration, as well as making your calcium score worse. So we do a whole talk. I usually do talks at the Belvedere Library right here in the Villages. Next month I'm doing a talk on July 20th on natural treatments for high blood pressure, hypertension without dangerous drugs. So how many of you take vitamin D? Look at that. Everybody pretty much in the room takes vitamin D. How many of you take K2 with your vitamin D? Well, about half of that number. So here's the critical thing about that. Never ever take vitamin D3 without vitamin K2. And the reason we say that is vitamin D is a really good supplement. It's really called a pro-hormone. It does so many important things in the body. But if you take more than 1,000 IUs of vitamin D a day without K2, you start to pull calcium out of your bones. Well, that's not so good for your bones, is it? And then where does that calcium go? Right back to your arteries and your brain and your heart, giving you some problems. If you take K2 with the vitamin D, that takes care of the whole situation. The K2 protects your bones, your heart, your brain from excess calcium being pulled out of your bones. Really important thing to understand. You need K2 with the vitamin D3. So what are some of the causes of all those things I just talked about that cause metabolic imbalance affecting your metabolic health? Well, the number one thing is probably poor diet. Poor diet. Most people in this country are on what we call the SAD diet, the standard American diet. Too many carbs, too much junk food, too much sugar, too much alcohol, not enough of the healthy foods that we should really be eating on a daily basis. And then there's other things that we can look at. Elevated CRP, homocysteine, I mean there's a whole long list of things here. Taking too many medications, being obese, diabetic, smoking cigarettes, on and on and on. So there's a number of reasons that it can happen that you're metabolically not healthy, but the good news is, for most of these things, there's something you can do about it. Now, you can't change your genes. You're stuck with the genes your parents gave you or your grandparents passed down. But again, diet, lifestyle, nutrition, those are all things that can bypass the negativity of the genetic variability or the genetic defect you may have inherited. So it doesn't mean you're stuck with that as well. So I put together what we call the 12 steps to wellness and how to improve your health. The first one is to balance adrenal stress. If you're over 40, you have adrenal stress in your body. Your adrenal glands are your stress glands. They protect your body. They deal with stress and anxiety. Gotcha. And so the next thing is neurostructural integrity. Having a nervous system that functions properly. That's kind of along what I do, in part of what I do in the chiropractic approach to things. Balance meridian energy. We talked a little bit, Margaret talked about acupuncture and how that's related to Tai Chi. So how the energy flows in your body, that can throw things off as well. Body nutrition analysis, checking to see if you're metabolically balanced. And a lot of times people are walking around, you may not know it, but you've got parasites in your intestines. And that often can be the cause of a lot of the problems that you have. And then maybe you are enzyme deficient. Sometimes people will go to their doctor, oh, I'm having such heartburn. Every time I eat, I just reflux and heartburn. And what does your doctor say? You have too much what? Acid, right? Well, often the problem is you don't have enough acid. And that food sits in your stomach and basically ferments, and you don't have the enzymes to digest the food properly, and that's why you're having the heartburn and the reflux. So we look at that as well. And then your intestines are not right. So we look at probiotic balance. And we also look at how stressed you are with emotions. And maybe you have some allergies. Maybe you're sensitive to that EMF field that your cell phone that's glued to your head all the time is putting out. And then maybe some people have heavy metal issues. And we look at lifestyle, diet, and what's going on with your blood work and other tests that can indicate there's some metabolic imbalances. So these are some things that can interfere with your body healing itself. And each one of these things can be helped and taken care of, or maybe avoid certain things if you're exposed to them. A lot of people don't drink enough water. That's a big thing right there too. Dehydration is a big issue. So here's something to think about. 1/4 of what you eat keeps you alive. The other 3/4 keep your doctor alive. Think about that for a second. Okay. So here's a summary of that. Eat less crap. Eat less carbonated drinks. Refined sugar, artificial sweeteners, processed food. Eat more food. Fruits and vegetables, organic lean protein, omega-3 fats, and drink healthy, clean water. So you have to decide, is it more important for you to keep eating and drinking the things that you've been drinking on average and gaining weight, or are you looking to make some changes? And if you don't make changes in your diet and your lifestyle, what's your life going to be like in a year, 5 years, 10 years from now? So is it going to look like this? Or is it going to look like that? And a lot of that is up to what you make on a regular, daily decision basis. I tell my patients all the time, I can tell you all kinds of great stuff to do, but you're the one that has to decide, am I going to listen to Dr. John, or am I going to do what I want to do and then come in and complain to him that I don't feel good still, because you haven't done what you're supposed to. So I really like this quote from Dr. Greenberg, who is a retired medical doctor, and he says, as a retired physician, I can honestly say that unless you are in a serious accident, your best chance of living to a ripe old age is to avoid doctors and hospitals. And think about that. And learn nutrition, herbal medicine, and other forms of natural medicine, unless you're fortunate enough to have a naturopathic physician available. Almost all drugs are toxic and designed only to treat symptoms and not cure anyone. That's why after chiropractic school, I went to naturopathic school. And I went to medical school after that to learn about all the drugs that everybody's on, that they don't teach you that much of. So, we do have a couple of quick things right here. Thank you for being here again today, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. If you're interested in finding out more about natural health and how it may help you in your life, we do have a little offer for people. We have what we call a complimentary pre-patient interview. If it's an invitation, you come into our office, there's no charge for it. It's about a 15-minute appointment, and we sit and talk for a few minutes. What are your health problems? What have you done about it? What would you like to do about it? And you get to interview me to see if I'm a fit for what you're looking for your health. And then we also have a special offer for anybody who decides they want to come in as a new patient. And Rhoda's got that over on the desk. So that's my little commercial. So there's our information, my website, drjpod.com. There's our phone number. And there's my email address. If you didn't like anything I had to say today, I'm glad to hear from you. If you liked it, great too. And there we go.